All right, it is Thursday, April 4th, 2024. We are here in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Indie filmmaker hangout with Sujewa Ekanayake.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to introduce yourself first? I don't know if everybody who watches my channel has seen your videos yet.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me on the show that we just invented today. Yeah, I came to Maryland for a family thing, and Matt is here. He lives in you're in Baltimore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he lives in Baltimore, so we decided to have a little indie filmmaker hangout, Baltimore and New York City. Even though Matt has some ties to New York City also, so maybe New York City times 2 plus Baltimore.
Right.
Anyway, glad to be on the show, Matt.
Yeah, and I'm glad this worked out because I'm a big fan of your films and your videos. You know, spreading the word about indie films, and I think giving people a lot of interesting ways to think about approaching releasing them. So on that note, I want to ask you, can you talk a little bit about your release strategy with especially your recent films with Cosmic Disco Detective Renee and the Secret Society for Slow Romance, how you've kind of rolled those out?
Sure. The plan has always been to do theatrical screenings, and I've done that since the early 90s. Whenever I finish up a movie, find a place to show it, and then I try to find other places to show it. Releasing movies on YouTube just started a few years ago. So there wasn't really, other than Vimeo VOD, there really weren't great platforms for putting out movies. So theatrical screenings have really helped me to present the movies to the world and also to present to the world and media myself as a filmmaker. Once your movie is in the theater, you're de facto automatically a filmmaker, a movie maker, because your movie is playing in the theater. It's no one can argue with that. So so now the strategy is some theatrical for publicity, YouTube releases, Vimeo VOD. I'm gonna look at Amazon, also Film Hub, pretty much any place that I can put the movie out on, and then doing a lot of promotional work for it.
Great. You know, I recently had the experience of taking a short film of mine to some festivals, and it was really the first time I've been able to see a film of mine with like multiple audiences. You know, not just a one-time screening, but actually like 2 or 3 times in a row, and getting to hear the reaction. Could you talk a little bit about the experience of seeing your own movies with an audience, and specifically just I think the feeling that produces, hearing the response, and did you learn anything? What did you learn about your own film from seeing it with an audience?
Great question. When I wrote Slow Romance and also Renee, I went to a theater that wasn't being used. I hung out at the theater, looking at the screen and imagined the story, and then I wrote the scripts. So from the beginning, these movies are made to play well in a movie theater environment. So that might be the reason that some of us people who like old-timey indie movies can enjoy these movies. These are not, web-oriented movies. These are cinematic theatrical movies. I always get a lot of good input by watching it with people. When they laugh, I know the comedy works where it's supposed to work. And if they're uncomfortable or if they're losing interest, I can tell. And overall, the cinematography looks great on the big screen, the sound. Usually I find more sound things that need to be fixed when I play it on a big system. But overall, seeing it in a movie theater is the best way for an indie filmmaker to watch their movies.
In your last 2 films, Secret Society for Slow Romance and Cosmic Disco Detective Renee, are really kind of a piece. I mean, the one it kind of takes place in the same universe as the other. Do you can you talk a little bit about your approach to making both of those films and how that's going to inform your approach moving forward in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, definitely. We were forced to make the Secret Society for Slow Romance just using myself and one other actor, the actress Leah Lorey, who did a great job on it. So all previous filmmaking norms were thrown out the window. It was just the two of us and no crew other than myself. So we had to figure out how to make it happen, and we came up with a system. What I found out at the end of that was a good way to make movies because it gives you a lot more time on set. You're not rushing to capture a shot list. And since I was the lead actor, I was able to dictate, the pace of a scene and how quickly things got shot as a director also. So I found that method of working, giving yourself lots and lots of time when you are working on a micro budget or no budget situation, is the thing that allows you to compete with Hollywood movies and other movies that have huge budgets, but they're shooting it fast. So you kind of have an edge. So I did a similar thing with Cosmic Disco Detective Renee. We spent a lot of time, a few months, shooting B-roll footage, going out, the two characters as a couple into the city, getting city shots and also shots of us. Then I put that together first as a 90-minute movie, and then I added the new scenes with that were scripted with dialogue and narration. So with each project, I'm going to try to experiment with new ways of doing it. Now that I see that following what is usually done is not necessarily that's not necessarily going to provide the best results.
The next question is kind of a two-parter, but in the interest of giving context to people seeing your movies for the first time, are there any specific influences that you can talk about, like filmmakers or specific films that are on your mind when you made these? And also, I think in the broader sense, maybe the context for, how you're working, the way you conceive of these films, if you can elaborate on that might help somebody appreciate them seeing them for the first time.
Awesome. Great question. Yeah, we'll do. Jim Jarmusch and other slow cinema are a big influence. Dialogue-driven comedies are big influences. Slacker. What else? Seinfeld is a big influence. For Cosmic Disco Detective Renee, noir movies and detective movies, or sci-fi movies especially, are a big influence. So it's indie, comedy, dialogue-driven sci-fi. That's what I'm making these days.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the indie film scene in New York and Brooklyn as you have experienced it?
Sure. Lots going on, crazy amounts of film projects happening, too many to keep track of. And but what I find most useful about living in New York and making movies is the city has such an energy, so many people up and about any time of the day, that you never see the city and go, oh, I don't feel like filming today, because it's happening. The show is happening. The city is like a show. It's happening. You just have to break out your camera and start doing stuff. So for productivity, it's great. It's not a sleepy small town. It's almost like living in New York. You kind of have to ask yourself, why am I not filming? Because this is such a cinematic scene.
It's interesting that in your films that New York, and even more specifically the indie film scene itself, almost becomes a character in the films. At least I think, especially in the last two, and Werewolf Ninja Philosopher as well, that figures into the plot. Do you want to talk about the role of publicity and promotion,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe where that's something that filmmakers can really benefit to expand their own efforts on?
Sure. Yeah, publicity and promotion, similar work, I think are as important as cinematography or acting or fundraising or anything that is traditionally thought to be crucial for filmmaking. You don't want to make a movie that is for the public or a specific audience and then not promote it. If people don't know that your movie exists, it's kind of like you never really made it, right? If you want to make something especially for yourself, that's a different thing, to learn or to experiment. But If you are an artist, then you're making stuff for other people. So, yeah, you have to get super into promo, become super comfortable with it, just as you would get comfortable with cinematography or writing. So, I highly recommend young filmmakers don't have a hands off or fearful attitude towards promo. Embrace it, talk to people, and you can do it in very good ways without bothering people. And a lot of people are interested. So, yeah, promo, 100%, do it.
I want to go back to the question about the indie film scene for just a minute and ask you, especially for younger filmmakers just starting out, if there's anything you can talk about as far as how that's changed since you began making films, anything at all, and any suggestions that you might have for younger filmmakers navigating that system today.
Sure. Embrace the amazing tech developments that have happened. When I started in the 90s, it was crazy difficult to get a movie made. So it had to be on 16 millimeter, otherwise no one would take it seriously. You didn't have the internet to help organize things. You didn't have HD video, you didn't have streaming, you didn't have YouTube. It was like making movies in the 1950s, practically. Then it got easier with Dogma 95 and digital cameras. Now, since like 2020, really, so it's a brand new thing. Filmmakers are releasing on YouTube, and YouTube is, at the moment, an undervalued, and some filmmakers know this, an undervalued release platform. I think Google has so much going on and so much money, they don't even really understand it themselves or don't care. But YouTube could defeat a even Hollywood wide release US type movie, because Hollywood wide release is like 3,000, 4,000 theaters in the United States alone, right? So if you do a YouTube release that potentially goes after 2.5 billion people worldwide, and you put some real promo muscle and money into it, that movie, such a movie could easily get to 300 million people. I mean, which is crazy numbers for traditional distribution. So, for indie filmmakers who are really into YouTube releases, they're onto a good thing before other people have discovered it. So, I think there's a period where some indie filmmakers will benefit just by being on YouTube. One thing I found with doing extensive promo work with the Renee movie, a lot of my views are coming from all over the world. I mean, places in Europe, Africa, Asia, that I would have never been able to do promo work in. And this is not even heavily targeted stuff. I just put it on YouTube, and YouTube is figuring out who's going to watch it at 4 in the morning and give it a like and, watch enough of it for it to be, significant for them. So there's a lot going on in YouTube that's a little bit mysterious, but if you put some ad money into it, do some promo, sooner or later, they'll figure out who to show the movie to get the views and the likes. So yeah, get super into it, but also combine it with the traditional outreach to media and talking to other filmmakers and documenting, just as we're doing now, the process. And also creating a lot of blogs and websites with ton of info. One problem I see with filmmakers is lack of communication. Lack of communication within the filmmaking scene, and also lack of communication with the general public and the media.
Is there anything about your next project, any details that you can share yet?
Yeah, next one is going to be called 53 Cases is the working title, but the actual title is much more exciting. The detectives, Renee and Allison, they're detectives. In the each one of these Cosmic Disco Detective Renee movies take place in a different dimension. In this dimension, they're both detectives, as well as filmmakers and activists, and they discuss 53 cases while they explore New York City that are coming up that have to do with sci-fi mysteries, which is a setup for a long distance, sort of long-term project that I'm planning, which is to make 50 plus movies in 50 to 100 months. So basically a movie every 1 or 2 months to release on YouTube and through other platforms, inspired by the indie filmmakers who are making and releasing movies fast on YouTube.
Do you want to say anything about the improv process versus scripting and how that plays into your work?
Sure, good question. Yeah, I love writing scripts. A lot of your not so great ideas you can work out on paper, and then by the time you get to shoot, you have something really solid that you can work off of. I wouldn't really want to shoot anything that's totally improv because results are okay, but with a script or with partially written or sort of a mix, results are like 10 times, 100 times better because people can tell a lot of thought went into certain lines, certain situations. Improv is good as an exercise, but for serious filmmaking, I think work with scripts, work with the co-writers, work with other writers, and just learn to write a lot. It's like anything else, just like you shoot a lot, just write a lot and then edit and then come up with a good script. So yeah, I always use scripts.
Great.
Good.
Yeah, we're at about 15 minutes here, so I just thought if there's anything you'd like to add, especially if you could let viewers know where they can find your work.
Sure. Thanks a lot for the interview. You can go to on Twitter at Sujewa Fantastic. On the web, you can go to nycfantastic.com. On YouTube, you can Google, you can type in Cosmic Disco Detective Renee, and all that stuff will lead to my work.
Right.
Thanks for the interview.
Thank you.
Let's ask you some questions. All right, Matt, it's your show, so no introduction necessary. So we'll just talk about a bunch of things.
Sure.
How did you first hear about my movies?
I believe it was through Twitter.
Awesome.
Yeah, I believe I found your work through Twitter or YouTube. You have a lot of great information about your films out there, so it definitely made it easy to find.
And then you checked some out, and you liked some.
Yeah. I take that back. I actually remember where it was now. It was your DIY Filmmaker blog. This is going back a while now.
Yeah,
that was the first time. Yes, and then when I later came across your work on Twitter and YouTube, I did remember you from that. So yeah, it's great that you've got all that information out there.
Awesome. Yeah, that started in 2006. So how many movies have you made, and what are the titles, if you can recall?
Oh, well, I just did a count yesterday, and I think I am at 55 plus if you include all the short films.
55?
Yeah.
What?
I believe it was 48 shorts, and I think it's been, I want to say 8 feature films if we're talking projects over 40 minutes.
Amazing.
Most of which I made in the last 3 years.
How is the response to your most recent movie, and what is that movie about?
Well, the most recent feature was Forbidden Frames. It's had a mixed response, which is what I was expecting. I don't think it's for everybody, but I've been pleased with, for the people who have responded well to it, I think they get it, and that's encouraging. The last short film I made was called Up and Down, and that was a short slapstick comedy. I used to make a lot of those types of films, so it was kind of a return to that for me. And that had a really nice response at the festivals that it played at. Most recently, the Berkeley Springs Film Festival in West Virginia and the Ocean City Film Festival in Maryland.
Awesome. Yeah, I was checking out Forbidden Frames, saw you were acting in it. Pretty good. Very interesting. How do you like acting, and is that something you want to pursue in future movies?
It is. Acting is something that I, when I was a kid and started making movies, with a camcorder and all that stuff, I acted in my films largely out of necessity, but I also really enjoy it. And it was just one of those things that for all these years I've continued to do. I never really thought much of it. And I've been asked at various times over the years, would you like to step back from acting and just be behind the camera? And there are times when I would. I mean, there's times that I'd like to do, films where I'm not necessarily having to write myself into the movie. But I enjoy the experience, and I like taking on different types of roles and trying different techniques, like with improv, which there was a lot of that in the conversations of Forbidden Frames.
Awesome. We may see Matt in one of my future movies. I have some ideas.
Yeah, that would be fun to do, like a kind of a crossover type project between us. I could see that.
Yeah, have you show up in one of my movies in New York. So let's step back a bit. How did you get into film? And you went to film school, if you want to talk about that a little
Sure.
bit.
Yeah, film has been a lifelong interest for me. It would be very hard for me to kind of pinpoint where it started. I guess movies have just always been there, but I do remember seeing films like Chaplin's Modern Times. I think I was about 8 or 9 years old. That had a big impact on me. I think seeing movies outside of the Hollywood norm, basically, the contemporary Hollywood norm. Uh, Citizen Kane was another early one that really kind of started to show me like just how much great cinema there was, from Hollywood's past, and then that led into exploring world, cinema and film from all around the world over the years. And anyway, and yeah, so that also kind of dovetailed with an interest in making my own movies. I sort of started doing that around the same age, when I was able to finally get access to a camcorder. That was I had all these ideas that were just waiting to come bursting forth. I could finally get my hands on the camera and start to tell these stories. And yeah, so then I was at film school and even grad school after that. That's been so kind of pursuing the study of film has been a side parallel track of mine along with making films. And yeah, I just turned 40 this year and I'm still making them, so I enjoy it. Yeah.
40 is
Yeah.
just a baby. Some people make films and live till they're 90, 100. Woody Allen is like 500 years old,
Yeah,
still
I think
making
he's
movies.
just getting ready to do a new one.
That's
So,
right.
Yeah.
So, how did you encounter the YouTube indie filmmakers like Dan Lotz and Joel Haver and the folk film movement, and what was your reaction to it?
Well, I was really intrigued by it and inspired by it. And I encountered it back in 2020, pretty much right at the moment that I believe they started posting these films. And I think that was actually just a case of the YouTube algorithm putting a video by Dan Lotz in my feed about the future of indie cinema. I think it was called.
Mm-hmm.
And what intrigued me about there were a couple of things I found really interesting. So what's kind of funny for me is that when I started making films right as I was coming up on the end of film school, and this was like 2006, YouTube was still basically in its infancy. I mean, I think it was about a year old at that point. Anyway, so at that point I was using YouTube strictly as a place to be able to show these short films, and I continued doing that throughout the next almost 15 years before I discovered the folk filmmaking movement, and the filmmakers on YouTube. And what I had found was that I never really cracked finding an audience on YouTube. I never had any kind of large viewership. I even had different channels over the years, trying different platforms, like Vimeo. There was a site called Daily Motion that I tried for a while. YouTube used to have that time limit of like 15 minutes, I think, or 10 minutes even, which was a limitation early on as I was starting to make some longer short films. Anyway, these were all things I was kind of dealing with over the years with YouTube, and it never quite clicked, but it was still the best that I had as a way to get the films out. It was still the best thing going as far as a way of getting the films out widely. So when I saw the folk film movement, learned about that, it seemed to me like the culmination of what I had hoped YouTube could become for a long time. But the other thing about it, of course, is the emphasis on feature films. And that's what I specifically found very inspiring, because I had made a feature film back I shot it for, I think starting in 1999, and finished it finally in 2003. It took me, forever to shoot it and then edit it. That went nowhere. That was when I was like right out of high school. And then, the features weren't really something I had considered coming back to, even though I'd made all these short films in the intervening years. The features weren't really something I came back to. And seeing the folk filmmaking movement, it made me realize, well, yeah, there's no reason why I can't make a feature-length film in the same way I've been making shorts all these years, which is as a totally zero-budget DIY affair, pretty much with a one-person cast and crew in some cases. it's like, well, yeah, why not? It's a matter of degrees. It's figuring out how to think about the time, the screen time. I mean, and to do something you and I have both said that I think we were inspired by the slow cinema approach. That was something that I liked about the features, was being able to do these kind of elongated. Anyway, that's kind of a long answer to your question, but yeah, so it was 2020 that I discovered the Folk Filmmakers, and then I launched the Low Budget Visions channel shortly thereafter as a way to, to promote that movement, to support the filmmakers, and to get conversations like this going.
Awesome. What do you find frustrating about, in general, as your life as an indie filmmaker at this point in time?
Well, I'll say this is probably the least frustrating I've ever felt as an indie filmmaker. The really frustrating time for me was going back like 10 years ago. And I don't know what changed, but I do feel like there was kind of a shift in the way that a lot of people have thought about indie film. I think there's more acceptance now for these kinds of, ultra low budget DIY types of films. I think I can kind of illustrate this with a story, which is back in very, very early 2020. I mean, like January of 2020, I had made a short film called Unknown Number, and it was a short thriller, very much like in the style of what I had been doing for the past, decade at that point. And I was really proud of this movie. I mean, I thought it was. I have to say, I thought it was one of the best ones I had done up to that point. But I remember, showing it to some filmmaker friends. And they were very supportive. I mean, it's nothing, nothing. They weren't being discouraging or anything. But I think I did detect kind of this bafflement about like, why did you make this? I mean, like, it's a perfectly well made short, but what are you going to do with it? And that was the problem. If it wasn't going to be going into like a big festival or being used as a launch pad into some sort of professional work or whatever, I did feel like there was this sort of confusion, I guess, about why to make a short film like that. And the thing was, I did it because I wanted to do it. That was really the only real reason. And I used to get frustrated by that because I guess I wish that there was a little bit more support for that type. Making a film just because you want to make it, and that's where I think now, and like. Finding your films like Cosmic Disco Detective Renee, like what I see is films that are really on their own wavelength, very personal, and I really like that. And they exist because you wanted to make them and put them out into the world, and I think that's wonderful. And I think a lot of the folk films we've talked about seem to be coming from a similar place. So yeah, in a lot of ways, I find this moment to be probably the least frustrating as an indie filmmaker. But I mean, I guess there's still, there's still just that issue of getting the films out there. Right? That can be frustrating if you feel like it can be hard to connect with audiences. It can be hard to sort of rise above the noise of all the various videos online that we're always competing with. Those are challenges, but. No, I mean, all in all, I feel very encouraged and very optimistic right now about the state of indie film.
Yeah, I mean, I feel roughly the same way. Any time I've lived in has been like the best time for indie film, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even during the digital days, a bunch of other problems, but now you can shoot on iPhones, you can release, so it's a great time for making movies.
Yeah.
How do you feel about how difficult or easy it is to deal with movie theaters, distributors, and trying to get mainstream type press coverage for your movies?
Well, I put my movies out on YouTube and just get them. Like I said, I just want them to be seen as widely as possible. It's great if people want to talk about them, but I do believe you have to be your own biggest advocate for your films at this level. Really,
or any level, I think.
Well, really any.
Yeah,
yes, absolutely. I mean, where you are putting your film out into the world, and you're faced with that question of ultimately, why should people care about this? I mean, you care about it because it's something incredibly personal and that you're passionate about making, and that's something that can be very hard to. That can be very hard to articulate that, of course. You really can't expect other people to share your personal level of passion for it. But I think what you can do is to tap into the shared passion that we all have as indie filmmakers, and beyond that, viewers who care about indie film. And I think if you can do that and get a good conversation going and get people thinking about the movies, give people something to think about. As I was saying earlier, if you think about the way Hollywood promotes a movie with a trailer that shows you, the best scenes from the movie, shows off the stars that you're going to see, the big special effects, moments. I think what indie filmmakers can do is to effectively promote a movie like that, or in the same way, is to give context for what you're doing. I think if you put the movie, and there are definitely filmmakers who like to put the films out there and let them speak for themselves, and that's fine. But I think it can be difficult for people coming to it like that without any
connect
context.
with it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think what we as indie filmmakers can do is to help to facilitate that conversation around our own movies.
Yeah, that's why I recommend doing lots of interviews,
Yeah.
articles, trailers, video,
Yeah, and get comfortable talking about it. Because I think a lot of people aren't, and that's fine. But it's like you were saying earlier, it's a skill just like anything else that you have to build and
over time.
Yeah, and I think you have to get comfortable with it and find a way that works for you to talk about it.
Yeah, I think in a way we can say that unevenly launched promo that's not super well done is still better than no promo at all.
Yeah.
Because people will see, there's something here, they're trying to convey something.
Yeah,
So
I'd say, for example, even if you just put out a trailer on YouTube, maybe put up a few social media posts, if you have a blog or website for it, something that allows people to find it.
Right.
If none of that's out there, then I don't see how people are going to find it.
yeah, even if they find it, they have no context
Right,
for it,
right.
no other references to it. They're gonna be like, "What is this?
Yeah.
Someone doing some weird thing, walking around like a
Yeah.
werewolf?" So, along the same lines, it's easy to make movies now. Easy to make no-budget movies now. Easy to release them now. What challenges do you see for no-budget YouTube filmmakers as they make their 5th, 10th movie? How can they stay engaged in the process going forward?
That's a good question, because I think there's a practical concern. I would divide it into there's the practical concerns like financing and budget. How if you're self-financing the movies and putting them out there for yourself, which is what I do. I mean, nothing wrong with that, but I think you have to figure a way to be able to do that within your means and to make it sustainable. Whether that's you're taking money from like a day job that you do, or you do fundraising, or whatever the source is, to do it in a way that you would treat any activity that is any passion project, let's call it, right? I think the way you treat any passion project, which is to put that money into it and accept that you're probably not going to be making it back right away, and decide for yourself what is that threshold. How much am I willing to spend? How long am I willing to do it? So there's the practical. The other thing that I think, which is related to that, but the other thing that I imagine a lot of people could run into is how do you expand on what you're doing, the types of films you want to make. In other words, if it's like me with short films. For so long I was doing that format, and I kind of got stuck in like a loop of making short films, and I did a lot of different things within that. And I guess it's the same thing with features. If you wanted to, for example, work with a larger cast, or
Scripted, maybe.
Scripted, exactly. Have more different locations that are needed. Costumes, props, whatever that might be, to tell your stories that you want to get out there. I guess it's just how, at a conceptual level, how do you grow? How do you expand? Rather than, I don't want to say repeating yourself, but I think that's just the phrase that comes to mind in terms of if you kind of get into the like a rut or a habit.
Yeah, you have to make it
scale.
fresh for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah, I think I'm talking more at a conceptual level now. It's tied to the finances, but I think it is a separate issue. Yeah.
Awesome. So find new ways and new challenges and trying to expand the thing that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing you can probably always come back to is trying out different approaches. It may not work, but it may show you a different way of doing things. I mean, for me, the improv approach opened up a lot of new doors. And
Awesome.
Forbidden Frames, for example, grew out of the conversations that I was having with my friend Colin Gallagher, who acts in the movie with me.
Mm-hmm.
And we took these real life conversations about film history, film analysis, whatever, and worked it into this kind of dystopian thriller, sci-fi type plot. And that's not a movie. I couldn't have imagined making that, 4 years ago, whatever. But it's just something that grew out of work I was doing with the feature format. So yeah, you never know where it'll take you.
Yeah, Renee was kind of done that way also. Improvisations, then scripted, and then filmed.
Right.
Awesome. So for people who are just discovering you for the first time on my blogs or pages, where can people find your work?
The best place is, well, if you're looking for the features, is the Low Budget Visions YouTube channel. Like I said, I started this as a way of kind of celebrating all these films that are out there to kind of participate in the conversation on YouTube, but it's also kind of become the sort of the umbrella banner for the feature projects that I've been doing. So if you go to Low Budget Visions on YouTube, on Twitter it's at Low Budget Vision, singular, and Instagram is at Low Budget Visions. Any of those places, I'll have a lot of information out there about Forbidden Frames and the upcoming movie, The Cinema Detective. I like to put out a lot of promotional stills from the movies. Usually every couple days I like to put out new images from the film, so you can see those there. And then I just started doing more of kind of a personal Twitter account too, which is at Matt Barry Film. So my name, Matt Barry Film, and it's the same handle for Instagram. As I've been growing out or trying to kind of relaunch the Low Budget Visions interview videos, I've been sort of partitioning off my own personal filmmaking endeavors onto these other pages, so that's why they're there now. I figure it's just more ways to get the movies out there.
Awesome. Great work, Matt. And we look forward to maybe showing some movies of yours in Brooklyn.
That would be great. All right, thank you.
Thank you.